Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I think we'll get kicked off now, just after 2 o'clock. Just make sure the audio is okay with everyone. Okay, thanks for joining us, everyone, today. So what we're going to be looking at today is our webinar series, which is focused on the changing role of the Office of Finance and of the finance team. And today we're going to look at how to create time and become adaptable and agile, and with a particular focus on budgeting, planning and forecasting. So, introducing your host for today, starting off with myself, Mark Cracknell. So I've trained and qualified with KPMG back in the 80s, seems a long time ago now. In the late 80s I qualified. Went to work in industry for 10 years, working in shipping and transport mainly in the UK and in Europe, and covering various roles from Group Financial Controller up to CFO. So I've got a lot of empathy for the subject we're talking about today, having been through it myself. Moved into consultancy in 1999. And since that time I've been working with organisations, helping them to improve their financial processes and their information delivery around reporting, analysing data, financial consolidation and budgeting, planning and forecasting. I'm joined today by my colleague Howard, who's just going to quick introduction.
Also a chartered accountant. I qualified in practice and did my time in audit, and then moved again into industry. Not quite as many years as Mark, but again, I've had some experience of some of the pains that we cover today. Yeah, it's a very, very brief introduction, but there we go.
And as you can see from the picture, Howard looks a lot younger than I do, unfortunately. So, what we really want to achieve out of today, the agenda we've got for today is really to get an overview of what this webinar series is about. And then we want to get into our experience of budgeting, planning and forecasting, and how we see organisations that we work with and when we talk to, and how they're playing out in that arena. We then want to dig into how we can really save time and create time for the finance team within that process. I call it BP&F. Apologies for that acronym. And look at how you can become agile and adaptable. And we're looking today at how technology will help you support that process. Today we're looking at IBM Planning Analytics, which is one of the technologies that we have some experience of. And then we'll summarise, and then we'll give a quick introduction about webinar 2, which is taking today's discussion a little bit further into collaborate and devolve. So why are we doing this? Well, we really want to help you understand more about the changing role of finance, and really about how you can transform the finance team into strategists. There's a lot of discussion nowadays about adding insight and value, and what we want to do is to help you reach that level, so you become strategists within your organisation. So we released a white paper 5 or 6 weeks ago, which talks about the changing role of the finance team and gives some background to the webinar that we're going to give today. This can be downloaded. It can be found on our website, and if you have a few minutes, it may be worth a read. But the 4 major key steps that we come out with in terms of transforming your team into strategists are the following. So the first one is all around creating time to breathe. As an accountant, I never had time to do anything apart from the day-to-day mundane running of the organisation, of the finance team. So the first thing we really need to do is to create you some time to breathe, to give you time to get your head above the parapet, to look at how you can become strategists. And we're covering part of that today. With the fast-changing world that we live in as well, the whole thing about being adaptable and agile is becoming ever more important. Brexit is a great example of this. I suspect a lot of organisations are looking at how they can become adaptable and change in the new environment. So one of the major things the finance team has to do is to provide the organisation with that adaptability and agility. So again, we'll be looking at that today. Leading on into our second webinar, one of the 4 key steps, we look at collaboration and evolving. Is getting other people within the organisation involved in the process around budgeting, forecasting and planning, and how this can be a very good thing for the organisation as a whole. And the 4th step we also see is how you can use your time to add value and insight to the business. So once you've created all that time, what are you then going to do with it to really add value to your organisation? Excuse me. So I always like to touch on the core financial processes that really take up the major part of a finance team's role. So what we're really looking at there is close and consolidate, budget, plan and forecast, and report, analyse and disclose. And really, if you take those 3 core processes, that amounts for 95% of the finance team's time. So what we're going to do today is concentrate on that budget, plan and forecast process. And we're going to look at that and the high impact on the finance team and the organisation as a whole. High impact in terms of time spent by the finance team in those processes, and also on the outcome on the organisation as a whole, and how that can impact the future thinking of the organisation and future profitability. So let's have a look at the BP&F process in a little bit more detail. And this is something that we've developed at HAYNE over the past few years, and this is what we call our BP&F Maturity graph. And it'll be interesting to see where you think that you appear on this graph once we've gone through the detail of it. So we have the axes are made up of a frequency on the y-axis and complexity and depth on the x-axis, and I'll just explain those two in a bit more detail. What we find when we talk to organisations is that there are differing levels of frequency. If you start off at the lowest level of granularity in terms of budgeting, then organisations at the lowest level will do an annual budget, a one-off annual budget covering perhaps say the calendar year. The next level that people tend to go to is an annual plus a quarterly reforecast, where either Q1, Q2 and Q3 probably you're doing a reforecast which is taking you to the year end. A further extension of that and another variation is the annual plus the monthly, where again we're reforecasting but this time on a monthly basis. And we have also seen people going obviously annual and weekly. That's especially prevalent in the retail sector where weekly accounting is the norm. One beyond that then is rolling. Now the interesting thing about those first 4 ones we've mentioned, which are annual, is if you've got a calendar year end, for example, you tend to find that come October, November, your outlook only goes out 1 or 2 months. So you kind of fall off the edge of a cliff, which is not reality. And there's been a lot of discussion in the industry about rolling forecasts and the fact you should be looking at least 12 months ahead all the time. So rolling forecasts is seen today as being the best practice. I'd go even further and say that there are businesses that we work with that are into continuous planning. So they're actually planning on a day-to-day basis. It might even be down at a manufacturing and operational level. So I think there is a position where actually you're into continuous planning, so the cycle never ends. In terms of the complexity that we work through as well, complexity or depth, I sometimes call it. So I've broken this into 3 segments. I've got financial, I've got driver-based, and I've got operational planning. Some examples of this: a lot of companies we work with and that we come across are only doing a P&L on a budgeting forecasting basis. That's quite a high level P&L, so turnover would be $1 million, say, with no backing to that, just a financial figure. So we're just talking pure financial numbers there in a P&L at quite a high level. An extension to that would be where we're then perhaps developing the P&L and a cash flow, which is obviously important to an organisation. Further extension might be a P&L, cash flow and balance sheet. And then we start to get into what I call driver-based, where some of the numbers within that P&L will actually have some kind of backing. An example of this would be turnover, where we might start getting into price times quantity. Complexity of that could increase perhaps to customers and also into products. And the complexity increases as we move further to the right. We start to get to a point where I call it operational planning, where we start to have connected plans where we not only have a high level P&L, but all of the figures within that P&L are being driven from within the organisation. So, for example, the HR number may be driven by an HR plan. So as numbers change in the HR plan, our P&L would update. You may have a sales plan, you may then have a manufacturing plan. And you get to a point further along the complexity graph where you've got something called S&OP, Sales and Operational Performance, Sales and Operation Planning, where you've got a bottom-up, top-down approach to planning. So you change some sales figures, that will change the manufacturing. So the whole thing is completely integrated. Where do we see most of our customers and the people we talk to? Well, I put an example there on the graph. Those that are in green are spreadsheet based still, and those that are in orange are technology based. And we see a lot of people around that bottom left-hand corner, around the annual and quarterly process, or the annual and monthly reforecasting process. And what they're doing as well is they're doing P&L at quite a high level, so they're getting into a little bit of driver-based, but not deep driver-based, or certainly not into operational planning. Most of the people who are at the top end of this graph in terms of continuous or rolling, and in the high operational planning depth area, are using a technology-based solution. If we were to look at where we think the limits are with spreadsheets, for those people who are using spreadsheets, there is a comfort zone down in the left-hand corner where spreadsheets are effective, can be efficient, and can work very well. I think there becomes a point at which, whether you're increasing your frequency or increasing your complexity, where the need for a software solution comes into play. I've used the phrase here, budgeting software, which kind of relates to some of the technologies which will allow you a limited number of users, say 15, 20 users, where you'll have some kind of functional driver-based capability within that software and perhaps some controls. So I'll call it a lower-end budgeting software solution. If you really want to get up to the high level of maturity within the budgeting and forecasting process, then what we're saying is that you really have to be into an enterprise planning software arena, where you've got an application which has got high functionality, allows you to be able to do what-if planning and scenario what-if, and also the ability to have multiple users. We see companies who may be involving, upwards of 1,000 people in a budgeting or forecasting process. So you need that kind of software which can deal with that number of people working in one environment. If you go to the extremes of the complexity, then what we're seeing being very prevalent in the market now is those companies who are using, in addition to enterprise planning software, they're using predictive analytics and decision optimization software. And they're two things that we cover a little bit more in our webinar next week. So two barriers that we see to people moving from the left to the right. As you can see, there are an awful lot of people that we know of and that we work with who are still using spreadsheet-based technology, but are outside what I'd call the spreadsheet comfort zone. So they're into a place where it's a complex process and it's painful for them. We have this thing called the spreadsheet threshold, and that's sometimes a very difficult threshold for people to get over. It's that move away from spreadsheets into a technology. And we cover some of those issues later about how to get over that spreadsheet threshold. The other threshold we see is more of a cultural one. And we talk about this in the webinar next week. There comes a point in operational planning where there is a cultural change in the organisation that's needed to get over that barrier. So how do you create time and become adaptable and agile? So how are you going to move yourself from where you are now through to the right-hand side of that maturity model? Well, as mentioned on the and shown from the graph and from our experience, technology really is the #1 enabler in this area, and it really is key to you achieving the objectives of moving yourself from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. One of the biggest challenges, again, that we see is the reluctance to move based on the fact that there's a big investment in spreadsheets that's there, and obviously moving that into another technology. So how do you overcome these challenges? So what we're going to have a look at today is a bit of technology in action. We're going to talk through some of those issues in a bit more detail, and we're going to be looking at technology today. The one we're looking at today is IBM Planning Analytics. Obviously everyone's heard of IBM, a huge organisation, and they invested a number of years ago in a product called TM1, so it was an acquisition. TM1 has been around for a long time. It's a best of breed planning and budgeting technology. And what IBM have done is further developed it and also now delivered it as a cloud front-end application, so given it a lot more functionality and delivered it in a different technology. A lot of companies are now moving into that kind of cloud environment. And what do IBM say about their own tool? Well, they talk about three things. They talk about speed, the ability to automate plans and analyze data and report. They talk about agility, the ability to be able to adapt plans and analysis and change to business conditions. Some of those things that we identified earlier as being vital to the Office of Finance, and being able to align financial plans with corporate objectives. Again, that kind of comes into play as we get into the more complex area of budgeting, planning and forecasting. And they use this word foresight, which I don't think is a particularly great word here, but it's about making data available to people so that they can visualize it and so that they can self-serve themselves in terms of reporting. So that's what IBM say about their IBM Planning Analytics product. So before we go into having a look at how that technology can help us and having a look at what that does, let's just break the budgeting, planning and forecast process down into three. So what we're really looking at here is the three steps of creating a budget process and completing a budget process. So, and I'm going back to my times here when I was working as a group financial controller. There was three steps in the process. The first one being that pain around setting up the model for the new year or setting up the model for a new forecast, which was never as easy as it should be. Quite painful in terms of setting up a set of Excel workbooks and distributing those to the organisation. The bit in the middle then is the administering of the process, so that's the data collection itself. That's when we've got lots of people involved in inputting numbers into in this case spreadsheets, and then delivering those back to the centre. And then we've got the completion of the process where we're getting into that consolidation of all the results together and the reporting. So I'm just going to break down looking at planning analytics and what it can do for us into those three subsections. So let's just have a look at step one, and let's just talk about some of the problems that we have. And I remember some of the painful times creating what I call an Excel plan, where I would start off with a master template, which may have changed since the last quarter, may have changed in terms of accounting structure, may have changed in terms of company structure. And I create that master template, put as much protection around it as I can to make sure people don't mess around with that Excel spreadsheet. Then I have to distribute that to my numerous divisions or organisations that are going to be completing this. And of course, as well as just distributing that master template, inevitably I might want to give them a starting point, populate it perhaps with last year's actuals or with the previous forecast. So all of those individual sheets then had to be populated and then sent out. And the worst case scenario would be that halfway through that process someone decides to change something in terms of the account structure or in terms of a product structure, and then I'd have to recreate the template and resend out and redistribute. So very, very high maintenance around that master template and getting that whole process sent out. And then I'd get into the problem as well where I've got into version control. We always had those arguments about which version we were working on. Endless discussions about it's version 1, it's version 2. Not even talking about the numbers, just actually arguing about the version. So from my point of view as an accountant, 2 tasks that I would really like to be very efficient. And the first one is creating new data versions, i.e. rolling over into a new year or a new forecast. I'd love that to be a simple process. I'd also love to get to the point where I can populate the data really, really quickly, so I haven't got to spend all of that time populating endless spreadsheets with data. So I'm going to give the unenviable task to Howard now to explain to me how planning analytics is able to achieve that.
Thank you very much, Mark. So here we go. This is the sort of front screen to planning analytics. So I will just log into that. And as you can see, this is that sort of browser-based portal that we've got here. And when I first open up planning analytics, this is the welcome screen we're greeted with. We can see we've got these sort of tiles which represent the books that we've been working on. We've also got this folder structure on the left-hand side, sort of a shared and personal, which allows a sort of level of security. So I'm just going to click on this planning analytics book here, one we created earlier, so to speak. And this will bring up this dashboard that we've created. Now you can see we've got the 3 tabs for this dashboard, and this front one is very much just a sort of representation showing a nice graph. We've got the sort of click-in boxes where we can select which version, which company. And again, you can see that sort of changing in real time, demonstrating those sort of key financial metrics and allowing the user to really sort of dynamically change what they're looking at. Likewise, we've got this products tab, which we'll look at a bit later, and this admin tab. So if I look back at the management tab, you can see we've got these versions. So we've got our actuals, our budgets, our forecasts. And what we're going to do is create a new one of these and just show how easy it is. So I will click into this worksheet we've created, select create a new budget. We'll call this one webinar budget. And if I click on create new budget, it's as simple as that. If I flick back to the management dashboard, you can see at the bottom we have already got a version here called webinar budget. Now, as you can imagine, the only thing is this is populated with zeros at the moment, so there's no data there. But what I want to do is say, pick up the initial budget dimension and say, right, I'd like to populate webinar budget with the same financials. So I select those there, press populate, and we've written the processes so it is as simple as pressing that button, and then if I flick back to my management dashboard, if I flick to actual, and then back over to the webinar budget, again, you can see we've now got that data across all the companies. It is as simple as that, and for each month, although this looks a bit messy, let me just tidy this up a little bit. There we go, that looks better. There we go. So yeah, it is as simple as that, and it just shows that we've created that new version element in the version dimension, and it's created it for every single time and every single company, and it just shows the ease of use that you really can't do using your standard Excel modelling.
Excellent. Okay, thanks there, Howard. I think the other interesting thing that I can see immediately is that as soon as I'm updating things, then all of my dashboards are updating immediately. So a new version is being created and the new version appears in the reporting. But that certainly would have helped me years ago when I was spending all those evenings trying to fill in Excel spreadsheets. Unfortunately, you just came along too late, I'm afraid, Howard. So let's just have a then look at step 2 of the process. And the step 2 then is really getting into, getting the data into those models. And I've split this into 2 aspects. First is kind of the user aspect, where I've got a lot of users out in the field who are now going to fill in these templates that I've sent out, my Excel model that I've been working on. And I've probably protected them pretty heavily because I don't want them messing around with them, because when they come back, they've all got a link back into my master template. So they've got to fill in the data. They probably want to be able to do some kind of profiling. So if they've got rent, for example, they might want to split that over the year. So that we want to be able to make data entry as simple as possible for them. Also, of course, we want to make sure that every time we update something, then everything else updates with it. We don't want that situation where we've got standalone workbooks and data isn't coming back into the centre. And the other thing that users would really love is to be able to play with the data, to be able to do some kind of what-if scenario. Perhaps look at best case scenario, worst case scenario, to see how that might impact, and then perhaps decide internally which one they want to go with. From a group point of view, the bit that I used to find quite difficult would be that visibility over the process using Excel, where I would send out the Excel templates to people in the organisation and see nothing at all, and not know how they were getting on until the point at which they were sent back to me. So visibility over the process would be great to see where people are in the process. And also the inevitable feedback loop where we get the answer back from Division A, but the managing director doesn't like the answer. He'd prefer net profit to be 3 million more than you're going to report. So inevitably he sends it back to you and says, this is the figure that he would like, the good old top-down approach. And I suspect we've all come across in our past. And also that whole thing around data and version control. What I want to be able to do is to control the versions. I want to be able to control the data. So I want some mechanism to be able to do all of those things, which I kind of lack inside the Excel environment. So a bit more of a difficult one this time, Howard. So I'm going to pass over to you and see what you can do on this front.
Thank you very much. We'll give it a go. So again, we're faced with the management dashboard that we were used to. I will now click into this control tab that we've got, which opens up this TM1 web view. You can see on the left-hand side here, we've got the hierarchy, company hierarchy, with all the individual entities underneath it. And that brings it into this main pane on the right-hand side here. Again, we've got the various states, the owners, reviewer, comments, things like that. So it gives a real good overview of each entity and what state it's in. So for instance, if I click on this first company, Frango, it will open up this, it will open up in the sort of TM1 engine, so to speak. And we can see there, we've got this view whereby we're looking at the admin expenses with the accounts down the left and the total year and the months rolling up to that year along the right. Now, for instance, we've also got the dimensions at the top here. Now, if I was coming in here and I wanted to amend something, for instance, if I pick up on the travel costs, I want to put a figure in there, let's say 10,000, hit return. We can see that proportionally spreads it over the total year by the amounts that were in there previously, so they all net up to that 10,000. So again, a really nice feature that you wouldn't have in Excel. Likewise, if I put 400 in these property taxes for January there, I have the option to right-click on that and say, right, let's do a data spread. Now I can pick from one of these options for spreads. Let's keep it simple, do an equals spread. Say, let's spread that across, right, apply that, and you can see for the total year, it's applied that 400 by each month. So again, really nice feature, and you can do that at any level you want and across any sort of dimensionality that you want. What's also quite a nice little feature, if I select wages and wages and salaries here, I can hold that item there and say, right, I want to keep that at 99. Let's also enter a figure here, say 7,000. It'll spread that 7,000 while keeping that £99 for that top wages and salaries account there. So it really does give you good flexibility and allows you to sort of play with the numbers in a way you can't in Excel. What I'll do, I'll commit these numbers, so that writes them back to the database, and you can see they've changed colour to black. What's also worth looking at is this sandbox feature we've got up here. So I can click on that and create a sandbox. So if I create a new one, this sandbox, we'll call it number 3. It really does just sort of allow us to create different sort of modelling areas. So it picks up from the default. I can then click in and around, change all the numbers as I'd like. So for instance, I'll put it at the top level, see it apply that both ways. There we go, they will turn blue. And I can say, because I've done this in sandbox 3, I can just sort of quickly flick back to the default, and we can compare the totals, see what we like, see which model we like the look of best. So for instance, I will go with this sandbox 3, and I think, yeah, I like the look of these numbers. Let's submit these numbers, and if I click on submit there, click on yeah, and close that. If I then look at this main overview here, we can see for my company, it is now locked as a state. We can see ones that haven't been done are in that available state, while others which are being done are in that reserved state. Now, as the overall manager, I might come into here and say, actually, let's reject that because we don't like it for whatever reason. That user can then reject it, and they can furthermore go in, enter into the commentary area, and click there. They can then write a comment stating their reasons for rejecting that particular version. So I'm being very, very ambiguous and vague and saying rejected due to incorrect budget. Click OK, and we can see that comment there is for all users to see, so that they can come in and look at that and do what they want with that. So again, that really does show the overview capabilities that we've got with planning analytics. It just shows how individual users can see their sort of entities that they're responsible for and make any amendments and adjustments accordingly. I hope that sort of what you're after.
Yeah, that's very good. I do like the rejected due to incorrect budget commentary. I think some of the people I've worked with in the past, that was about as much as we got back. Normally along the lines of, can you make the profit a certain figure? You begin to wonder whether you might as well have started with that figure in the first place. But no, that certainly gives me a very good view of my organisation and where people are, and is also allowing me obviously to control versions, which I think is a very important piece. Being able to control data once it's submitted to the centre. So let's get on to that step 3 then, that completing the process and reporting. And again, I go back to my days as a group financial controller, and looking at that process where all of those spreadsheets are coming back in, and what I would normally have would be a consolidation master, which would have links to all of those underlying workbooks, and I would go away and update all of those links, and eventually I would get that consolidation to work with a few checks, And then I may either use that consolidation workbook to do some reporting, or I might have another set of workbooks that fed from the consolidation workbook that would then distribute it to users. So that whole process from completion by the subsidiary to actually getting data out to my end users might be 2, 3, 4 days by the time I checked the data and made sure that it was all okay. Again, life shouldn't be that difficult, I don't think. The other thing that really used to get me at that point as well would be that the managing director would turn around and decide that he's got a new product that he wants to launch in March, and he'd let you know right at the last minute. So what would be interesting to see is how can we deal with some of those sort of late organisational changes, new products. How are we dealing with consolidation and aggregation of data, although I've got a fairly good idea of what you're going to say, and then making that data available for reporting, that sort of last pain of getting this out to the users. So I hand over to you again, Howard, for that part.
Okay, all right, let's have a look here. So hopefully we will pick up on that management dashboard again. So I can see we've got this product dashboard, which we referenced earlier. We can see we're looking at all the various products we've got. And again, we've got these clickable modules where I can say, right, how are those products looking for the budget? How are they looking by month? Again, just allows that great user sort of ability to drill down. I then click into the admin console. And if I open that up, we should click on the company. And it will take us to, again, this sort of TM1 web sheet that we've already had built. Again, very simple functionality. We've looked at creating the new version. We're now going to look at creating the new product. So if, again, take a very simple product. Let's call this one widget 1. And we put a price and a cost in here. Let's call it 1,000. Cost will be 800. And if I just click on this here and say, let's create a new product, again, what this is doing is populating that dimension. If I then return to home and I can close this, and if we have a look at that product tab, you can now see on the further right hand side, we've got that widget 1 there. Now obviously at the moment all we've done is create that product in the dimension. We haven't actually populated it with any data. So I'll go back into my admin console and fire that up again. Again, this is very clever because what it's done is created that product for all the other dimensions, so it's created it across the board. And I will say, right, I will pick the version I want. Let's stick it to the budget. For the company I want. And let me just rebuild this current sheet. That's total product. So hopefully I want to select the product that we just created, which is that widget 1. There it is. And here we can see there's the 0 units. So all I would do as a user is come in here and enter the units that we are forecasting. And you can see that automatically populates that revenue figure based on when we built the original product. So all I would do is commit that data, that writes it back to the database, and return to home, and then I can just close this down. And if we now look at my product dashboard, we should be able to see in as real time as we're going to hope, and let's refresh this. There we go. We can see that widget 1 has now got a profile built up. There we go, 100,000. And I can flip between the months, and you can just see that changing accordingly. So it's really good. It just gives you a real good insight into, again, how easy it is to add a product at the last minute and allocate data, revenue to that particular unit. Again, I'm only really touching the sides here of what's possible. We kept it very, very simple, but I think it gives you a good idea of how it works and what you can do with it.
Yeah, okay. Thanks very much, Howard. I think the thing that strikes me is not just the fact that we're adding a new product into the mix, which would cause me enough pain in the past, but we're actually is actually updating on my report as well. And that visualization piece is incredibly important, I think. So we've got that kind of dynamic flow to everything that we're doing inside the application. So perhaps we can summarize a couple of things that we've seen here, and I think it's quite good here to compare a spreadsheet solution against technology, because I think that gives us quite a good breakdown of why this is happening and some of the background to this. So if we concentrate on the spreadsheet technology, what in fact is happening when we're using spreadsheet technology is we're actually utilizing Excel not just as a data entry mechanism, but we're also using it as a database to hold the model logic. And that's all held within one place. And in fact, to the extreme that we're also actually holding reporting in the same place as well. So we've got a lot of things going on inside that Excel workbook. And that then creates limitations and it creates complexities. What's happening inside our technology, of course, is that our model logic is being held within inside that enterprise planning system or solution. So that's being held there along with the data, of course. And what we're then finding then is for data entry, all that we're using either Excel or a browser, I'll just mention that Excel in a second, is we're using it as a window onto that data to take data. So we're not holding data within that mechanism. I've got Excel there because I know that IBM Planning Analytics and many of the other technology applications out there will allow Excel as a front end to these enterprise planning systems. And that's a nice way to be able to get over that barrier of technology, in that you can use Excel, which your users are very comfortable with. The only difference is that the data is being held in a back-end enterprise planning system instead of being in the Excel workbook itself. If we go into the reporting piece, again, that is dealt with separately. So as we've seen from what Howard has shown us, we've basically got a browser front end where we're doing our visualizations and our reporting. And again, we've got users who can access that. So what we're seeing here is that we've got an immediacy of data entry into an enterprise planning system that can be immediately available at the front end to reporting. And I think that demonstrates very, very well how a spreadsheet and technology are different in terms of delivery and capability. So let's just summarize the benefits of technology in terms of those two things we talked about at the beginning, about creating time and about being adaptable and agile. And really about creating time, there are a number of aspects which allow time saving within the finance team, or creation of time within the finance team. Self-service reporting, a very important element. If we're allowing a portal to allow our users to self-serve, then we haven't got them knocking on our door, producing reports for them and asking us to manipulate data and revise reports for their purpose. So self-service reporting takes a lot of weight off the finance team. In terms of model maintenance, being able to use a technology which allows us to create new years very quickly, to create new budgets, again takes a lot of pressure off the finance team, and being able to populate data sets very quickly with the prescribed data, whether it be 3 months actual and 6 months forecast. All of those things are very easy to put into the system. In terms of managing the process, we're creating time not just for the group finance team around the management of that process, but also for those subsidiary and divisional users who are hopefully saving time on data entry and perhaps being given a lot more capability around data entry and data spreading. So we're providing more capability and hopefully saving time. And at that front end around consolidation and reporting, with the immediacy of the data going into the database, really there is no consolidation process because it is happening within the system automatically and reporting is immediately available. For adaptability and agility, the main thing here is that the model changes are immediately propagated. I can change models, I can add products, I can add companies, and immediately that's available to everyone in the system. And I think the major benefit that is often overlooked when we look at moving into a technology is around this what-if scenario. The ability to be able to change factors, change drivers, and to look at what-if scenario is absolutely huge. I know in today's demonstration we didn't really look very deeply into driver-based budgeting and forecasting. I think we'll cover that in a lot more detail next week, but there is a lot of capability, and especially when we're going into uncertain times, perhaps around Brexit, where companies might want to look at perhaps 5, 6 or 7 scenarios to decide which one is the best for their organisation. Adaptability and agility is going to be required even more going forward. So, key takeaways from today. Automating some of the budgeting, planning and forecasting tasks will really help create time for the finance team. I've put in there to increase control as well, because that shouldn't be underestimated. But really it's automation of some of the lower level tasks, which is then creating the time for the finance team. So we're not doing anything massively clever here. We're just using technology to automate repeatable processes. We're providing a technology as well that will allow adaptability and agility. So when the organisation comes to you and asks you to start modelling future scenarios, you've got a tool there which can achieve this. And what it's really doing is it's providing a platform for I put it for the finance team here, but it's a platform for the whole organisation to be more strategic. It does allow you to play with scenarios and what ifs, and to be the go-to people in the organisation. I would expect that operations will come to you as a finance team to help them strategise about what to do in the future, because you have the tools available to be able to give those answers. And really what we're talking about here is utilising the right technology. The right technology for the right job, and doing that will really help you transform your finance team from accountants to the level of strategists. So what next? Well, now you've created the time, and we've created that little window for you, and we've shown you how you can become more agile and adaptable. Then the next move to take you further along that maturity curve on the maturity graph is really to look at collaboration and development. How can you get other people in the organisation involved in the process, and how can you get them to accept responsibility and accountability for the actions that we're planning in the future. So same time next week we're looking at our webinar on how to collaborate and devolve, where we'll be talking about some of those issues about moving you upwards and to the right of that budgeting, planning and forecasting maturity graph. So thank you for listening today. We've opened the floor to questions. You can raise some questions in the question box, and I have actually got a couple to look at. Before I just go over those questions, what I will do is I will just look at the next 4 steps, which is to obviously join on the next webinar to take us into step 2 of this, and to take us across that maturity curve. Obviously the planning analytics software IBM planning analytics software is something that might be of interest. Of course we can provide a demo of that if necessary. And we do provide what we call a 3D workshop, which is a workshop where we come in and help you discover, develop and design a solution for your organisation. Or of course feel free to call me should you have any questions. Just 2 questions have come up actually. One is around, the question is about how much of your current Excel investment can you actually use going forward? That's a very good question. Certainly the data entry part, because most applications will provide you with an Excel front end, the data entry part is something that can be ported across, and a lot of users could actually then use a new system without actually realizing that you've got a new system as such, because in effect they're using Excel as the front end to pump data into the back end solution. So there is a certain amount of investment there. Taking some of the model logic into a technology is sometimes a little bit more difficult. But if you do already have a logic inside this, your spreadsheets, then that can obviously be used to design and build a new application. It's when you're starting from a blank piece of paper, obviously, that it becomes a bit more difficult. And the other question we've got is around, do we provide advice in preparing a business case to put forward to C-level for planning and budgeting? Yes, that's something that we often get involved in. Putting that business case across can sometimes be very difficult, because a lot of the benefits that you're going to gain from putting this software in place are in fact intangible. So sometimes a bit of experience in knowing how you can word that and how you can get that through your C-level executives would push you to a position where you can get CapEx sign-off on technology, which will help you make that move up the maturity curve. Are there any other questions at all that have been posted? No, I don't see any other questions which have been posted. So all I can do is thank you very much for joining us today, and we look forward to you joining us again next week, where we can look at the second part of the process on how to collaborate and devolve. Thank you very much.
Thank you.